Northern Australia is basically the perfect spot. It's right next to some of the world's busiest trade routes that move trillions of dollars worth of goods every year. With all that action going on, you'd naturally think this massive coastline would be packed with skyscrapers, shopping malls, and sprawling suburbs. But instead, the whole region is practically empty. So why is that? Okay, before you rush to the comments and type "that's not true," let's clear one thing up. Yes, there are some important cities up north, places like Darwin with around 150,000 people, or Townsville, which has about 200,000. But let's be real, it's a bit of a stretch to call them major cities. Large metropolitan areas are generally considered places with a population of 1.5 million or more, like Sydney, Melbourne, or Perth. Now take a look at them. Can you see what all those cities have in common? Yep, they're located in the southern part of the country. Australia is massive, stretching across a little under 3 million square miles, making up about 5% of the world's total land area. To put that into perspective, you could fit almost 60 Englands inside Australia's borders, but it's also one of the most sparsely populated countries on Earth. See those red zones on a population map? That's where the majority of people live. This means that the center of Australia is, well, practically empty. That's basically because this area has an intense climate covered with semi-arid and desert regions. It's really dry most of the time and hardly gets any rain, so they end up facing big challenges when it comes to having enough water. During summer days, average temperatures are typically between 98 and 102 degrees Fahrenheit. And suddenly, living by the beach starts to sound a whole lot more appealing. Looking for more bearable temperatures is one of the reasons why most Australians are concentrated along the coastlines. Great, but think about it, Australia is totally surrounded by ocean waters. Yet for some reason people choose the southern coastlines, not the north. That doesn't make much sense at first. So take a closer look at Darwin, and you'll see that it's actually closer to Indonesia than it is to Australia's own capital. We're talking about the world's fourth most populous nation, with one of the fastest growing economies. Indonesia has a ton of positive ingredients behind that growth. It's rich in mineral reserves, has a large working-age population, and is becoming strong in sectors like manufacturing, trade, and digital services. Put all that in a blender, and Indonesia's economy is expected to grow at an average annual rate of 4.8% over the next few years. In fact, experts believe that Indonesia and Southeast Asia in general will be some of the most important regions for Australia over the next 100 years, financially speaking. So that brings us back to the question, why hasn't the northern part of the country turned into a booming metropolis soaking up the benefits of its prime spot near Asia? Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. First up, the weather. The top of Australia has a tropical climate, and that means two things: it's hot and humid. During the wet season, it rains a lot. And I mean a lot. The region suddenly gets hit by big, intense storms. Thunderstorms can put on a heck of a visual show, but the situation can also get pretty tense. When it rains that much, it also floods, sometimes badly. Roads can be closed, and towns get completely cut off. As a result, producers have a hard time distributing their goods, and stores sometimes end up with empty shelves. It's like a domino effect. The afternoons feel super sticky. With the air so humid it feels like you're walking around wrapped in a warm, wet blanket. During the wet season, humidity often stays above 70%. But, sweat isn't the only problem. The real issue is that all the heat and dampness cause infrastructure to wear out a lot faster. And the wet season also means it's tropical cyclone season. Cyclones can stick around for days or even weeks and often follow messy, unpredictable paths. They're dangerous and bring all kinds of hazards like extreme winds, heavy rainfall, and storm surges. Then, a few months later, comes the dry season. Humidity takes a break, and there's very little rain. But that means the same wetlands dry up and vanish under the scorching sun, leaving cracked earth behind. That leads to dust, fire risks, and water shortages. This kind of wild weather might work out fine for small towns or a few businesses, but it's a real problem if you want to develop a big city. Major cities need reliable infrastructure and steady access to water and energy, and the North doesn't provide any of that easily. Maintaining a modern city up there would cost a fortune, without a big local population to help pay for it. Mining companies do operate in the North, extracting minerals, gas, and other resources, but they don't build cities, they build temporary towns. Workers fly in for a few weeks, then fly back home. There is money in the North, but it doesn't translate into busy centers. Now here's the second reason why there aren't any big cities up north. The place is super remote. Sure, it's closer to Asia, but that's a whole other continent. When it comes to Australia's own big cities like Sydney or Melbourne, the North is really far away. And it's always been lacking good roads and railways. That's tied to how things played out in Australia's history. Some would say it's a too little, too late situation. Because when Britain first settled Australia in 1788, they made practical choices. Over the years, settlers picked spots with safe harbors, manageable weather and fertile soil, all things the northern coast just didn't have. Early attempts to build towns up north, like Port Essington, failed spectacularly due to disease isolation and harsh conditions. Only Darwin managed to survive, but like I mentioned earlier, it never grew into a major city. But none of this means the region was empty before Europeans arrived. That brings us to reason number 3, protected areas. The North has long been home to diverse Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, groups who were living there thousands of years before Britain showed up. Over the years, many areas have stayed under traditional ownership or have remained deeply significant to Indigenous communities. Even today, big parts of northern Australia are Indigenous lands, national parks, or conservation zones. These lands are protected by law. So, developing these areas means navigating complex legal agreements and risking damage to places of enormous cultural and spiritual significance. In other words, it's not exactly easy to just come in and say, hey, let's build a big metropolis right here. But it's not like the idea hasn't crossed people's minds. Experts have come up with plans every now and then to open up the North. Many of those plans have ended up failing, mostly because of all the reasons I've already talked about. Even in 2025, the North's remoteness is still a problem. But that doesn't mean it can't be developed. Right now, there's fresh buzz around that old dream, with the Northern Australia Action Plan working to crack the code. Authorities are pouring billions into roads, ports, and infrastructure, hoping to spark industries like clean energy, minerals, and agriculture, all while working closely with Indigenous communities who call the North home. It's a bold vision, sure, but it just might finally turn this vast, wild region into a thriving frontier. For now, though, we just have to accept that the North remains mostly wild, full of intense storms, breathtaking landscapes, and unique animals you can't find anywhere else.